Voyager's been invited to take some shore leave on a planet inhabited by the Nakani, and are using the chance to learn more about them. This seems to involve walking through some sacred tunnels, with our guide saying it's a sanctuary for the spirits of their ancestors. Kez and Neelix are part of this particular tour group, and after Neelix pokes a totem of some sort, because why treat other religions with respect when you can get a bit handsy with them, Kez thinks she hears something back the way they came. Neelix didn't hear anything, suggesting we're in psychic shenanigans territory, but Kez wants to investigate. We come across a cave with a large, ominously glowing entrance, and I've seen enough science fiction to know that's where they keep the malevolent AI or alien they worship as a god. Kez's curiosity is stronger than any sense of foreboding, and she goes to take a look. Or doesn't, as the barrier on the door declines, leaving her unconscious at the bottom of the steps, while Neelix shouts a bit. B'Elanna and Kim, who are also on the tour, run back, and B'Elanna contacts the ship to teleport Kez and Neelix to sickbay. The tour guide is most apologetic for the unpleasantness, but you see, this is the most sacred of chambers, so you must leave. Oh, and nobody but the monks know what that blast was. Oh, and you can't do any scans, 'cause that'd be disrespectful. Oh, and Kez is going to die. I do hope this won't stop you from visiting the gift shop before you leave. We have some lovely postcards. Up in sickbay, the doc is treating Kez. She's in a comatose state, but without knowing the reason why, he's a bit buggered for finding ways to fix it. We're scanning the chamber from orbit, but through several meters of rock, there's only so much that can achieve. Neelix wants to help, and instead of telling him to test the doorway again, just to be sure, Janeway sends him to find out about the holy site from official records and historical documents. While he's doing that, Janeway has a meeting with a magistrate, who turns out to be the guide for our away team. He doesn't really know about the site or the spirits himself, he says, as he's just a government official, not a member of the Spiritual Council, which does rather beg the question of why he was giving the tour, but let's ignore that for now. He says he's asked the monks for an audience on Janeway's behalf, but they're not interested. State and church are entirely separate entities, so he has no power to force them. As an aside, while I do appreciate the need for a certain amount of sovereignty in religion, not putting up a sign does rather feel like a health and safety violation. But then maybe that totem Neelix poked actually says, "Please don't go in the kill room, we called it that for a reason." Anyway, the magistrate can't give us a lot of information on the site and the monks, but from what he understands, that particular shrine is one that purifies the souls of the monks. Oh, and they pass the barrier by performing sacred rites that involve speaking directly with the spirits. Oh, and they're sworn to secrecy afterwards. So, to summarise, the glowy room with the shield has something in it that can be spoken to, nobody's allowed to talk about it, and the people who leave it have been cleansed, presumably affecting their behaviour. When I made that comment about an AI or alien, I thought it was a joke, but based on this, it looks like we're on the money, so time for a little game. Tiber Septim for AI, Akatosh for alien. Artificial intelligence it is. Back in sickbay, the doc tells us the planetary scans Kim and B'Elanna have run are essentially useless. He's done what he can based on no data, but there's not going to be an improvement unless he gets more information about what caused the coma. And there's a time constraint now too. The longer she's under, the more likely it is that she'll suffer permanent harm. Tangentially, we've made a point in the past of not knowing anything about Akampa biology, specifically in Season 1 Episode 4 Time and Again and Season 2 Episode 4 Elogium. Given that lack of reference data, coupled with the knowledge that Kez has latent psychic shenanigans, meaning that her brain is super weird, I don't see how the doc can categorically state she'll suffer permanent harm. But again, I digress. Neelix returns from his trip planet-side with what data he could find on the shrine. It isn't much, but there is one potential lead. An old fable about a prince who wandered into the cave and was struck down in the same manner as Kez. His father, the king, refused to accept his death as inevitable, and instead performed the same rites the monks use, so he could talk to the occupant of the shrine, who, we've established through scientific methods, is an AI. The prince was granted mercy and lived. Sounds like a plan, so Janeway gives the magistrate a call. He's familiar with the story, but says the king was given that audience because the spirits, or AI, accepted that the king was responsible for the child. Janeway argues the same is true of a captain and her crew, and, whilst I'm not personally convinced the two are comparable, the magistrate seems to buy it, so let's keep stum, yeah? Based on that, she wants to do the whole ritual thing. Janeway's reading up on potential parallels between her situation and other religious ceremonies known to Starfleet. While doing so, she has a conversation with Chakotay, who notes her unshakable faith that the ritual must provide some physical effect, that the answer to this will all be explained by science. We're contrasting Janeway's pragmatism against Chakotay's willingness to explore the spiritual side of an argument, and the inclusion of this scene makes me wonder if the writers will leave the inhabitants of the shrine deliberately vague for a more subjective conclusion to the mystery. But we've tossed the coin now, so it's AI or bust. We'll soon find out either way, as the magistrate/incompetent tour guide gives us a call. He says the religious council is intrigued by her request, perhaps with no small amount of flattery that she's willing to so fully research their history. The magistrate also seems delighted by this prospect, though in his case it's probably because he's trying to avoid a lawsuit. We'll begin at sunset. Before Janeway sets off, the doc implants a subdermal probe to keep an eye on her life signs. Bonus, it also acts as a teleport beacon that'll bring her back to Voyager if she activates it. Assuming the cave doesn't have any special science wibblies or swirlies in it. You know, like an AI would have. She's also given a tricorder by Tuvok, which I'm pretty sure the magistrate said wouldn't be allowed to Kim and B'Elanna, but we'll see, and is offered a phaser, which she declines. In the cave, Janeway's trying to make contact with the guide who's supposed to take her to the shrine, but nobody's acknowledging her presence. Except one woman who's repairing a light and, after inquiring of Janeway's tricorder, pockets it before introducing herself as Janeway's guide. We're taken to a group where Janeway gets daubed with dye and given a change of clothes, and the guide asks Janeway if she's committed to this course of action before mentioning that their scanners detected the probe under her skin. That seems pretty high-tech for a religious order, but we probably shouldn't read anything into it. Artificial intelligence. They don't have a problem with the probe, though, saying it won't make a difference. She's led to a room where 3 people are waiting to start the ritual. They've been waiting for quite a while, in fact, so much so that they've forgotten how long. They invite Janeway to join them in waiting, but she thinks this is a test and instead says that one of her crew is in danger, so she must move on. She knocks on the door at the other end of the room, which is answered by her guide. Janeway says that, unless this room has a purpose for the ritual, she'd like to move on. Her guide agrees, and it's at this point that I start to seriously doubt the AI business and lean towards a more subjective conclusion. Her guide takes her to a room where we have a little chat about Janeway's expectations before we run through some tasks, beginning with her holding a stone. We progress to finger painting and rock climbing, all while our guide needles her about needing certainty and absolutes, her drive to find definitive answers. Back to the rock, and Janeway starts to flag, seeing the rock glow with an inner light at one point. The doc is detecting that she's experiencing physical exhaustion and a change in brain chemicals, ones that could perhaps help counteract the electric shock from the shrine. Back in the caves, the guide brings a basket over to Janeway while she's resting. The basket hisses, and whilst I don't own any wicker baskets myself, I'm pretty sure that's not normal. The basket contains a creature that bridges the gulf between the physical and spirit worlds, at least that's what our guide says. All Janeway has to do is stick her hand in. Anybody who's watched the tree stump scene from Flash Gordon knows where this is going. She falls unconscious after a slideshow of flashbacks, one of which involves her dropping the stone she was holding, making me wonder if any of the other events even happened and that this might be induced by exhaustion. As an aside, this tickled a memory in my brain about fatigue-induced hallucinations, so I had a quick look into it. All the stuff I found was linked to sleep deprivation over a period of time, rather than from a single relatively short-term physical strain, so maybe they've dosed her with shrooms. Or the basket monster was real and the bite was hallucinogenic. Either way, I wouldn't be surprised by an ending where that guide doesn't really exist or has been dead for centuries. Regardless, we cut to Janeway lying in the centre of a Goa'uld sarcophagus from Stargate. She mumbles that she's dying as the guide closes the lid. Back on Voyager, we're having a little chat with the Doctor. Despite him saying Janeway's vital signs are stable, Chakotay's concerned that it's been 3 days since she's had any sleep, and that the probe shows she's been poisoned with an unknown toxin. The doc says none of this is life-threatening. Indeed, these two things combined are causing chemical changes that may neutralize the shield thing which zapped Kez, though, as a side effect, she's also tripping balls. Tuvok tells them he believes Janeway would want to continue no matter what, so that's the end of that. Janeway's still in the sarcophagus, but her brain isn't. That's on a coast somewhere, speaking to the maybe guide, maybe not. Janeway says she's gone through all that was asked of her, fulfilled every requirement to speak to the spirits, and asks that Kez be restored to health. But the guide tells her the challenges were meaningless, and that she already has what she needs to save Kez. Janeway smiles and wakes up. The guide helps her out of the sarcophagus, tells her she's been there for over a day, and gives her back her uniform before Janeway leaves. Back up on the ship, the doc is checking Janeway over to make sure she's okay. Nothing major, but she could do with some rest. Good news though, as the data gathered by the probe shows that the ritual causes changes in the brain which neutralize the energy wibbly that knocked out Kez, so he should be able to treat her with that. We give it a try and it nearly kills her. The doc doesn't know why, so I guess we're going back to the planet. The guide tells Janeway that the challenges she faced, the tasks assigned, were the ones Janeway expected, and she was simply allowing Janeway to exhaust those expectations before beginning the real ritual, which feels like a dick move to me, but I suspect the writer is trying to make a point about seeing the world not as it is, but as we are. The ritual begins, again, as it did last time, the waiting room. Its inhabitants welcome her back, and this time she sits. But she hasn't learned the lesson, and tries to discover who they are, suggesting they may be the spirits she was supposed to talk to. She's still trying to apply labels and find order instead of simply seeing what is, a point that they spell out for her. Science hasn't worked, they say. Her probes and scans were pointless. The solution, they suggest, is a leap of faith. The field that caused this? Pass through it with Kez. Everything you know, every data point you've gathered, tells you that this will kill you both, but if you believe it won't, then it won't. We teleport Kez to the surface, and Janeway tells Neelix and Chakotay what she intends. They react as you'd expect, and I assume the metaphor here is that they're playing the part of temptation against Janeway's act of faith, with her guide being the angel on her other shoulder. She picks up Kez and carries her to the field, which flashes as they make contact, causing Kez to awaken. Back on the ship, the doc is telling us that Chakotay's scans of the cave show it contains a particle or other, one that caused some science in Janeway and Kez because blah 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 blah. Janeway sits, listening but not. When he inquires if she concurs with his assessment, she says, without any conviction, that it all sounds perfectly rational, before she leaves sickbay and we fly away. Lean not on your own understanding. It's a phrase I've seen on signs outside of churches, and one which I used to interpret as another way of saying, stop thinking. I'm not a religious person, and in that respect, Janeway and I are similar. We also both seem to like neat and tidy answers to questions, the elimination of doubt, the solid bedrock of science. For all her curiosity, this episode shows Janeway's need to look at a thing and, after enough poking, be able to say, I see how it works. This, incidentally, might be one reason why she has such a close friendship with Tuvok. They share the need to create order from chaos. But what happens when that scientific mind finds a situation that cannot be broken down into digestible logic problems, where the only solution presented is by a guide who says, lean not on your own understanding? While I still think the phrase can be abused to enforce obedience, it occurs to me now that there's another possible meaning. Not the rejection of your own knowledge, but the acceptance of its limitations. Lean not on your own understanding, for your experience of this universe was never meant to be used as a crutch against that which is different and strange. Janeway's difficulty in accepting this, being humbled by that which was more than her vaunted science, is an interesting development for the character. That said, we never do discover what's in the shrine, so, as far as I'm concerned, it's an artificial intelligence. I'll never know that for sure, of course, but let's call it a leap of faith. End of episode.